Well, I'm not an expert. I'm not an authority. I'm someone who has been a murderer for almost 20 years.
These are the chilling words with which Ed Kemper introduces himself. Let's watch Kemper's 1984 interview now, with a keen eye on what he shares genuinely and what he shares to curate the narrative, manage his reputation, and toy with the interviewer.
Well, I'm not an expert. I'm not an authority. I'm someone who has been a murderer for almost 20 years.
Can you say how many people might be doing crimes like you were doing?
It would be a guess, but it's not. It's far more than 35. It isn't that impossible in this society. It happens.
Are there more people?
They didn't give up.
How many?
She didn't give up. I did. I came in out of the cold. And what I'm saying is there are some people who prefer it in the cold.
What did people see?
A nice guy.
Did you like Kemper?
I like Kemper.
And here's the core of the matter. Even knowing what Kemper has done, Kemper can still generate such a rapport with FBI profiler Robert Ressler that he likes him. That's a very impressive feat and a real insight on how effective Kemper's camouflage as a nice guy is.
You were able to appear like an ordinary person, non-threatening to...
I lived as an ordinary person most of my life, even though I was living a parallel and increasingly sick life, other life. One victim let me back in the car. I locked myself out. She opened the door for me. My gun was under the seat. What in the hell am I doing telling you that? Am I a masochist? Am I looking to be tormented further? I'm trying to show you just how awful this got, how commanding these rages got. I was raging inside. There was just incredible energies, positive and negative, depending on a mood that would trigger one or the other. And outside, I looked troubled at times. Other times I looked moody. Other times perfectly serene. Not very sane. But again, people weren't even aware of what was happening.
Here he is referring to his fourth victim, Aiko Ku. Aiko was a 15-year-old dance student who, after Kemper pulled a gun on her and accidentally locked himself out of his own car with her inside, let him back in. He rewarded this kindness by murdering her.
In 1972 and 1973, a series of murders shocked Northern California. College girls began to disappear while hitchhiking. Two of the victims were picked up from the campus of the University of California at Santa Cruz. That's where Ed Kemper's mother was working as an administrative assistant.
You were involved in the campus because your mother worked there.
Yes. I was also involved in killing co-eds because my mother was associated with college work, college co-eds, women, and had had a very strong and violently outspoken position on men for much of my upbringing.
His mother is the heart of the matter. The college co-eds were proxies for his mother. For the longest time, Kemper was unable to express his anger towards his mother to her. Therefore, he displaced it onto these college co-eds, his victims. He killed them as proxies for his mother. Now, we will see some of the depth of Kemper's rage at his mother and how he feels she viewed him. In my clinical work, I often find that the opposite of what patients say is often what they truly feel and mean. So, when Kemper says, "I wanted to love my mother," I wonder if the opposite, "I wanted my mother to love me," may be closer to the heart of the matter.
My mother was a sick, angry, hungry, and very sad woman. I hated her, but I wanted to love my mother. I watched the alcohol increase. I watched her social life drop off. I watched her get bizarre. She had terrible pain from her life, earlier life, her upbringing, a failed marriage with my father. I'm a constant reminder of that failure. I hate to distill it down into such, into one-word realities like that. There's a lot that leads into that happening, but that is what happened. They represented not what my mother was, but what she liked, what she coveted, what was important to her, and I was destroying it.
Kemper has enough insight to recognize that his murders were a way of indirectly attacking his mother. He destroyed what his mother liked and valued instead of loving and valuing Kemper. I wonder if he hoped that by destroying all the other things she loved and valued instead of him, she may, eventually, have been forced to focus her attention and love on him. I've seen similar subconscious thought processes drive violence among patients. It is also interesting that he says, "I'm a constant reminder of that failure." His use of the present tense is telling. His mother died in 1973. This interview took place in 1984. However, Kemper's mental picture of his mother's disapproval is clearly still very active and accessible in his mind. Her disapproval isn't historical, it is current in Kemper's mind. Even killing her hasn't freed him from the sense of her disapproval and judgment.
Why did you actually kill the girls?
My frustration, my inability to communicate socially, sexually, I wasn't impotent, but emotionally I was impotent. I was scared to death of failing in male-female relationships. I knew absolutely nothing about that whole area, even if just sitting down and talking with a young lady. I need to be able to really communicate.
This explanation has some flaws. On at least one occasion, he went out and killed immediately after an argument with his mother. Also, he was engaged to a woman from March 1973 until his arrest, which argues against being completely unable to communicate socially or sexually.
And ironically enough, that's why I began picking people up. And I'm picking up young women. And I'm going a little bit farther each time. It's a daring kind of a thing. At first, there wasn't a gun. I'm driving along. We'd go to a vulnerable place where there aren't people watching, where I could act out, and I say, no, I can't. And then a gun is in the car, hidden. And this craving, this awful, raging, eating feeling inside. I could feel it consuming my insides, this fantastic passion. It was overwhelming me. It was like drugs. It was like alcohol. A little isn't enough. At first it is. And as you adjust to that, psychologically and physically, you take more and more and more. It's the same process. So it finally came down to the thing of, do I dare bring this gun out? Already realizing if that gun comes out, something has to happen. It was going to happen. I didn't see it then, but it was going to happen. I was playing a dangerous game with a loaded gun that got us all. It got us all.
Note how he equates himself with his victims here. His dangerous game got us all. He sees an equivalence between his prison term and their murders. It is telling that Kemper sees nothing bizarre or distasteful in equating his victimhood with those he murdered. He is an intelligent man who is clearly very motivated to control what he says and how he presents himself. But slips like this show how he really thinks.
On one occasion, Kemper picked up 2 roommates in Berkeley.
In that first killing in May of '72, when that gun was pulled out, I launched it out. I had it under my leg, out of sight, parallel to my leg in the seat. It was something that had been thought out in fantasy, acted out, felt out hundreds of times before it ever happened.
Kemper drove them at gunpoint to a secluded area near a park. He took one of them into the woods, leaving the second girl tied in the car.
I had just gone through a horrible experience with her roommate stabbing her. And I was in shock because of that. I couldn't believe that it was that way. I had just gone through a horrible experience with her roommate stabbing her.
Consider the level of self-centeredness it takes to put the focus on oneself and one's feelings when recounting, 12 years later, a murder you committed. At no point during this interview does he reference the suffering of his victims.
And I'm walking back there bewildered. I gotta kill her. I can't let her go. She's gonna tell him. Everybody's gonna get me. I gotta kill her. I can't let her go. She's gonna tell him.
Kemper himself states in other interviews that one of the things he learned from administering psychometric testing to sex offenders at Atascadero was the need to leave no witnesses alive.
She sees the blood on my hands. What are you doing? She pulled back and she gasped. And I think, whoa, I don't want her to know what happened. I said, your friend got smart with me. She'd been getting really smart with me a lot, but I never hit her. I killed her, but I didn't hit her. I said, your friend got smart with me and I hit her. I think I broke her nose. You better come help. She's about to die. Why does she have to know that? I couldn't deal with telling her that. And when I attacked her, she didn't at first realize what was happening. It didn't go through. She had very heavy coveralls on. It knocked her right up into the lid of the car, but it didn't pierce the clothing. So it wasn't that swell a knife anyway. I went out and bought a pawn shop, huge knife. And I kept on just mindlessly attacking. She falls back into the trunk. I just killed a young woman. I slammed down the lid of the trunk. She isn't dead, she's dying. And I panicked. I thought, I just locked the car keys in because I can't find them in my pocket. Oh my God, I locked them in the trunk. I'm kicking on the trunk lid and yanking on it. Oh no, I don't believe this. I started to run and I tripped over the gun that I'd had in my pants that I had totally forgotten was there. I stopped. I said, stop and think. I collected my wits. Check all your pockets. I picked the gun up. I stuck it back in my pants, now remembering I had one. I checked all my pockets, and there's the keys in the back pocket. I never put them in my back pocket.
It is clear that Kemper is disappointed at how sloppily he performed, in spite of all the practice runs he had. He is clearly far more disappointed at the bungling nature of his actions than he is bothered by the fact that he murdered 2 young women. Again, this demonstrates a lack of empathy and insight.
Everyone makes mistakes, and that's what we have to hope for. The more mistakes they make, the better their chances.
I thought I was pretty slick, and went and tripped all over myself. That first 2 murders, the first 24 hours, there were 3 clear times I should have been busted, and I wasn't. Because 3 different individuals or 3 different groups of people got scared and minded their own business and looked the other way.
Some of the people who are committing murders, even as we speak, if they're doing it by themselves and they tell no one about it, they could go on undetected until they decided to stop. And the police wouldn't catch them unless we just happened to roll up on them while they were doing it.
Even after police warnings against hitchhiking and an increased bus schedule on the campus, Kemper had no trouble picking up hitchhikers. Ironically, one warning advised riding only in cars with university stickers. Kemper's car had such a sticker.
My mother worked at the campus, and I had an A sticker on my car, an obvious access day or night to the campus. I was picking up some very lovely young women. You know what we were talking about as we're driving around? Almost as often as not, this guy that's going around doing this stuff. And the second they started talking that, they didn't realize it, but they were getting a free ride. I couldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole, I swear. You know, but they'd be telling me what all about this guy, and they're comparing notes and speculating on what he looks like, how he carries himself, why he's doing this stuff, telling me about it.
This section highlights, again, the ability of Kemper to camouflage himself as normal for short periods of time in order to function effectively as a predator.
So how come they get in a car with somebody at that time?
She judged me not to be that guy. I didn't look like it. It was getting easier to do. I was getting better at it. I was getting less detectable. I started flaunting that invisibility, severing a human head, 2 of them, at night in front of my mother's residence, with her at home, my neighbors at home upstairs, their picture window open, the curtains open, 11 o'clock at night, the lights are on. All they have to do is walk by, look out, and I've had it.
Why did you keep the heads? Why did you cut them off, and why did you keep them?
Something out of my childhood. I could put it on an incident. I mean, my father chopping the heads off of our 2 pet chickens and my mother insisting that I eat them for dinner. You know, we could say it was something that simple. I don't think it was.
This is very interesting. Kemper posits the simple explanation of a singular childhood trauma causing his derangements to spring forth fully formed. Immediately afterward, he negates this simple explanation. I wonder what reaction the interviewer had to that initial simple explanation. Frequently, when I'm interviewing psychopaths, if they float an explanation or motivation and they see a negative reaction, they'll immediately negate it and try to move the conversation onto other topics. I wonder if this is what happened here, and Kemper was improvising to see which explanation got the most favourable response, or if he had always planned to proffer the simple explanation before moving on to the more complex one. Without the interviewer's reaction being caught on camera, it is impossible to be definite, but it is an interesting speculation. He now posits that the incident may have triggered the development of certain thoughts and fantasies. These were then reinforced by other issues, almost certainly the physical and psychological abuse he suffered from his mother. This initial incident and the various abuses then led him to become a serial killer. Another way to read this is that he is a victim of external events happening to him, setting him on a path and forming him into a serial killer. He is clearly establishing an external locus of control and responsibility, a feature in antisocial personality disorder and psychopathy. Locus of control is the degree to which people believe that they control the things that happen to them versus the degree to which they believe external events outside of their control determine what happens to them. If someone has an external locus of control, then they view events as being the outcome of many forces outside of their control, which to a great extent determine what happens to them. Locus of responsibility is a closely related concept, which addresses how much responsibility a person feels for the outcome of events in their lives. Generally speaking, those with internal locuses of control who believe that their actions play a large role in determining outcomes tend to take responsibility for those actions. Those with external locuses of responsibility feel that others are more responsible for what happened than they are. An example of this occurred with a patient who was diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, psychopathy, and both an external locus of control and responsibility. This man assaulted another man with a deadly weapon and seriously injured him after this man struck up a conversation with the first man's girlfriend. When I asked him how he felt about the fight and the resulting legal proceedings, he replied that he thought it was very unfair that the other man wasn't charged for inciting him by talking to his girlfriend, and that the other man was 100% responsible for what happened and any injuries he sustained. In fact, not only was the attacker upset the other man wasn't charged, but he believed that he should only be charged with self-defense, as this other man talking to his girlfriend was the first blow struck, and he was only reacting as anyone would. He had absolutely no insight into the fact that he was the aggressor, had overreacted, and caused suffering. When I asked if he was glad to hear that the man hadn't died from his injuries, he said he was, because this would mean that he would face lesser charges. Complete lack of empathy, total self-centeredness, and complete external loci of control and responsibility on show.
Now, my dad heads out back with a hatchet. I got on my bike and I tried to stop it. I remember that. I got on the bike, rode around the block. I was crying. I haven't talked about that for a lot of years. I'm sure that may have implemented something, that may have gotten something rolling, but along fantasy lines. But it took a lot of years of development along those lines to really get off.
But how are you able to, in 1 minute, have someone's head in your hand, and very shortly thereafter?
Living through a fantasy, however that would relate to that severed head. And then 5 minutes later, I'd put that away, and there'd be a knock on the door, and I'd put it away and answer the door, and the landlady would be there, and we'd discuss it.
Discuss what?
Reality. Her reality, not mine. Some people go crazy at that point. I felt it. It was one hell of a tweak. I mean, to just flip out and not know where I was. to be walking up the stairs with a camera bag that belonged to a young woman that had her severed head in it. Walking up to my apartment, past a happy young couple coming down the stairs who nodded and smiled at me as they went by. Good evening. And they're going out on a date where I'd love to be going. And I'm aware of both of these realities, and the distance between those two is so dramatic, so amazing, so violent, that really, I could feel the wheels squeaking inside. That was really pulling on it. And I imagine at that point some people break. But I didn't literally go insane. I didn't get lost.
Kemper explains the difference between his behavior when involved with his victims and when doing other activities as two different realities. The fantasies which felt real to him at the time versus the reality that others inhabited, but he only visited. I wonder what would have happened if he had put as much energy into pursuing a healthy relationship with his fiancée. Would he have been able to find relief from his dysfunctional relationship with his mother and been able to avoid becoming the CoEd killer? We will never know because, unfortunately, Kemper didn't choose the difficult path of tough, objective reality, but instead chose to pursue his lethal fantasies.
And all this time, Kemper was able to seem normal. He even hung out at a bar across the street from the courthouse, making friends with policemen, trying to pick up information.
They'd buy me a beer, I'd buy them a beer. Casual relationships, but I was poking around a little bit trying to find some things out. I knew they wouldn't be privy to hot information, but there were some things that were bothering me, like were there any speculations on how they were dying?
Did the cops like you?
Like I said, a friendly nuisance. I got in the way, and it was deliberate. Again, friendly nuisances are dismissed.
Psychopaths are practiced at putting on a facade of normalcy to achieve specific goals for limited periods of time. We see this most clearly when they stalk their prey and when they camouflage themselves within society to avoid being spotted. Kemper used his superficial charm to play the role of the friendly nuisance, the easily dismissed friendly nuisance. While in this role, he found out information about the police investigation and suspicions. This information was then used to help keep him safe from police detection. This is a very clear example of how psychopaths engage in time-limited, goal-directed behavior to gain advantage over others.
How did you get the knowledge to outsmart the police?
Watching television, believe it or not. Joseph Wambaugh, police story. Got some tremendous insights into not just the gimmicks, the actual things, the tidbits that you would pick up from their procedures, but the mechanics behind that, the logic behind it, was I would not allow myself to walk into even a potential trap of behavior. And one of those was talking about those crimes too much to people, initiating conversations about that.
And again, Kemper's intelligence is on display. He researched police procedures as much as possible, noted behaviors the guilty displayed, and avoided them as much as possible. In general, he did what he could to be as effective and as efficient a killer as possible, for as long as possible. A true predator.
There was a memorial service for two of the victims.
Yes,
Were you tempted to go?
yes.
But
I'd seen one too many episodes of one too many crime shows where that is one of the available resources for clues. Tracking down the attenders, one man taking pictures of the people there to eliminate as potential suspects.
Clever. He resisted behaviors which he believed would cause him to be identified as a suspect. This is what makes truly intelligent psychopaths so dangerous. Thankfully, the average psychopathic serial killer has a slightly below average intelligence.
some police department, now they actually came to your house to pick up a handgun.
Sheriff's representatives. One of the detectives was upset because he heard I had a .44 Magnum pistol and was a convicted man. He came to take the gun away, and it was on he and his sergeant detective. They were staking out the wrong house. It was across the street, and I'm playing around with the car, standing next to the gun in the trunk. They come over and ask me about, excuse me, sir, do you know who lives in this house across the street here? Well, that house was 609 Harriet. You crossed back over to this side into 609 Ord, and they were looking for me and didn't even know that, see what I mean? Bad news. Well, at any rate, we walk into the house to have them ask my mother about this other house, and I'm saying, hey, which 609 are you looking for? And they said, are you Ed Kemper? Yes. And it goes on. And I needed to find out what they were looking for, the murder weapon, the .22 automatic, or the .44 Magnum. And I don't want to advertise that I've got a whole bunch of guns. So I made a comment to divide between the two. And I said, just quite a little gun, isn't it? And he retorted, a .44 Magnum, I hope so. And I said, okay, because that loaded .22 was under the front seat and guaranteed me an arrest right on the spot. And .44 was in the trunk. I forgot that. I took him in the house, went into my bedroom, and the closet doors open, and I have a high-powered rifle with a scope on it.
You had some other stuff in the house too, yes?
Yeah. I had the personal effects and identification of the last two CoEds that had been murdered about 2 months before, right next to the guns in the closet, in a box.
Could he have seen it?
No, but when he arrested me for having all those guns and went through the rest of the closet looking to see if there were any pistols or anything else, he couldn't have helped notice a purse, a book bag, and CoEd ID inside of those belonging to their two latest murder victims. I back up and said, oh, excuse me. I just remembered something. And instantly he responds to what I'm saying. My hand moves. Back we go outside, and he's still thinking, boy, this is a really nice and helpful guy here.
Some of these people do what you and I do to become better killers. They practice their trade.
For any psychopath or serial killer to be successful and successfully get away with their crimes for even a short time, they need to be adept at camouflaging themselves to appear harmless and unworthy of notice or suspicion. Clearly, Kemper honed this skill as, for a 6'9" tall, 300-pound man living in the area of the murders, he aroused little suspicion prior to his confession.
Didn't Kemper stop himself toward the end of his career?
Kemper says he did. He says he could have gone on. He said he had fantasies of killing dozens more people, of leaving a trail of bodies across the country, and at one point he just got on the telephone and turned himself in. He said it was time for the killing to stop. In his case, he said publicly that it was his mother that he was killing all along. And when he killed his mother, that was the end. It's a very deep psychological observation from himself. It may be very accurate.
I agree with Ressler that Kemper's observation that his CoEd victims were all proxies for his mother, and in killing them he was exercising his anger and hatred towards his mother, is correct.
It was springtime. It was April. For 2 months I hadn't killed. And I said, it's not going to happen to any more girls. It's got to stay between me and my mother, and I can't get away from her. We're still fighting. She's still belittling me. I'm like a puppet on a string, and I entertain her. She knows all my buttons, and I dance like a puppet with that pain. And it had even gotten physical, to where I had physically grabbed her and thrown her onto her bed, trying to emphasize a point that I was threatening to kill her. So here I pick up these two young ladies in Berkeley on Ashby Avenue. One has flowers in her hand, petite little dolls. They're in granny dresses, and they're hitchhiking, a couple of real experts. I want to see how together I am, if I can resist this temptation.
You going to Walnut Creek? Great.
And they get in my car. They want to go one way. I know they need to go the other. If they go the way they're insisting on, we're headed right back out to where the first two CoEds were murdered. And I'm saying to myself, oh my God, all I got to do is relax, and they'll take me to their death. I've got the gun in the car, the same one I've been doing it with. I insisted. As gently as I could, I took them where they needed to go, to their college.
Thanks a lot.
That was 1 week before I murdered my mother. I said, she's got to die, and I've got to die, or girls like that are going to die. And that's when I decided I'm going to murder my mother. I knew a week before she died, I was going to kill her. And she went out to a party, she got soused, she came home, went to sleep. I was woken up by that, came out. I walked up to her bed. She's laying there reading a paperback. As many thousands of nights before. And she said, "Oh, I suppose you're going to want to sit up all night and talk now." Shit. I looked at her, I said, "No." I said, "Good night."
This is the first significant display of emotion in the interview so far. It has taken almost 20 minutes of the interview to appear.
And I knew I was going to kill her, you know? And I was so cold and so hard. And that's the first time in 10 years I've looked at it that way. I mean, that intensely, that honestly.
I don't believe that for an instant. This is Kemper's intelligence, camouflage skills, and ability to adopt useful behaviors for a short period of time on display in full force. Let's not forget that Kemper has applied for parole on 5 separate occasions since this interview. He knew that this interview would be seen and taken into account by the parole board. Bearing this in mind, do you really think he isn't seeking to use this interview to promote a narrative he thinks will improve his chances for parole? Of course he figured all the angles and is using this interview and interviewer to further his own agenda.
It hurts. Because I'm not a lizard. I'm not from under a rock. I came out of her vagina. See? Came out of my mother. And in a rage, I went right back in.
Here, Kemper appears again to be engaging in an effort to show that he has emotions, feelings, and isn't a psychopath. He is trying to present himself as reformed and safe to be released back to society.
For 7 years, she said, I haven't had sex with a man because of you, my murderous son. This is one of our arguments. I cut off her head, and I humiliated her corpse. It's there. You know? 6 young women dead because of the way she raises her son and the way her son is raised, the way he grows up. And what's her closing words? I suppose you want to sit up all night and talk. God, I wish I had.
Kemper is again selling his narrative that he is not really responsible for these murders. It's the way his mother raised him. It's all really her fault for psychologically abusing him so badly. But now how he wishes he had stayed up all night and talked with her. He is again implying that he is reformed and safe to be released back into society.
Your grandmother and her daughter-in-law, your mother, were 2 women very important in your life, and you killed them both. Could you say what they were like that led them to the same fate?
Same thing that kept them from ever being friends. They were both aggressive, matriarchal women. They'd been the daughters of strong matriarchal women. I still loved my mother. It's hard for somebody to comprehend that you murder your mother through love. It isn't a rational process. It's a very painful process. It isn't rational. And I've got to still live with that.
I think this portion of the interview is quite honest and sincere, as seen from Kemper's perspective. There is clearly a dichotomy at play in his relationship with his mother. He had a towering anger and hatred for her, but craved her love and attention at the same time. It is not uncommon for individuals to hold 2 such divergent opinions and feelings at the same time. It isn't healthy and frequently results in very negative outcomes for themselves and those around them. These sorts of internal conflicts can be helped tremendously with therapy, a much more socially acceptable and less harmful treatment modality than becoming a serial killer.
Why did you wind up giving yourself up?
It had to stop. It had to stop. Once my mother was dead, there was almost a cathartic process at that point. I got physically ill right then when she died, when I murdered her. And once she was dead, there was no way I could back out. I had backed down from giving up 1,000 times. You know, I used to get drunk and go sit out in front of the sheriff's department in a parking lot across the street on one of those old concrete parking berms. And I just sit there and say, oh, I still can't. The clanging doors, I could still hear them. No, because it'll never open again. You know?
Catharsis, he says. That invites us to believe that murdering his mother was a healing process for all of his repressed emotions. It invites us to believe that now that his mother is dead, he has achieved catharsis and there is no risk of him murdering again. This is a very dangerous line of thought. Note how many times Kemper refers to his mother in the present tense, even during this short interview. His mother may be dead, but her impact on his psyche still lingers. If released, were Kemper to run into another woman he views as aggressive and matriarchal, there is a significant chance he would kill again.
So I rationalized that to give up would be insane. To give up would be crazy. I'd be giving away my freedom, and I don't need to. But I look back on that and wish I had earlier when I was saying those things to myself. The people who were later dead wouldn't be. The regret that came later would have not had to be. Those people, not things, those people would still be with their families, with their loved ones. They would have their own families if I had had the courage to make that decision instead of painting myself into the corner.
Kemper made one very telling clarification in this section of the video. He said, those people, not things, those people would still be with their families. The interviewer didn't reference things. He certainly didn't label the victims as things. So why did Kemper feel the need to clarify that? Having interviewed many psychopaths over the years, I've heard many of them make similar clarifications. It has always been because their inner thoughts identify those victims as things. They're issuing an external clarification of their internal thought process. Internally, a part of Kemper still views his victims as things, objects of use to him, to serve his purposes. But he knows that isn't a good look for the parole board, so he clarifies his meaning, even though no one listening was internally objecting to his use of the word people to describe his victims. This is very telling, very revealing indeed.
They would have their own families if I had had the courage to make that decision instead of painting myself into the corner.
Where might you be if you'd never given in to the impulse to murder?
Where might I be? If my parole had been successful, I believe I'd be married, I'd have children, I'd be heading toward my first grandchildren.
Edmund M.L. Kemper III, better known as Ed Kemper, was born on the 18th of December 1948. At the age of 15, he murdered both paternal grandparents. This was just the beginning of his life as a serial killer. After murdering his grandparents, court psychiatrists diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia, and he was incarcerated in Atascadero State Hospital. This was a maximum security facility for convicts with mental health issues. There he was given 2 IQ tests. He scored 136 in the first and 145 in the second. Roughly 1 in 800 people have an IQ of 145. To put this into perspective, doctors' average IQ is roughly 125. So, it is quite probable that Kemper's IQ was higher than those treating him. Kemper used his intelligence to ingratiate himself with the psychiatric staff. The psychiatric staff trained Kemper to administer the psychological tests to other inmates. This gave him the opportunity to learn how to game the tests, to create whatever impression he wanted. He would use this to excellent effect soon. In 1969, on his 21st birthday, Kemper was released from Atascadero on parole. Over the next 3 years, he used his insight into psychometric tests and psychiatric assessments to convince his psychiatrists he was harmless. His psychiatrists were so convinced that they wrote If I were seeing this patient without having any history available, or without getting the history from him, I would think that we're dealing with a very well-adjusted young man who had initiative, intelligence, and who was free of any psychiatric illness. In effect, we are dealing with two different people when we talk of the 15-year-old boy who committed the murders and of the 23-year-old man we see before us now. It is my opinion that he has made a very excellent response to the years of treatment and rehabilitation, and I would see no psychiatric reason to consider him to be of any danger to himself or to any member of society. Since it may allow him more freedom as an adult to develop his potential, I would consider it reasonable to have a permanent expunction of his juvenile records. The day they wrote this, Kemper had the decapitated head of his latest victim in his car in the parking lot of their offices. After his capture, Kemper's introspection, insight, and intelligence made him an excellent resource for those seeking to profile and understand serial killers. He cooperated with many researchers, but the predator remained close to the surface at all times. When Stanford psychiatrist Donald Lund interviewed him in 1973, Kemper asked, "Has it ever dawned on you that I'm a foot taller and weigh damn near twice what you do?" The allusion to Lund's physical vulnerability should Kemper choose to attack him is clear. Later, the acclaimed FBI agent Robert K. Ressler was so troubled by Kemper during an interview that he hit the panic button to summon the prison guards. Noticing this, Kemper reminded him that, "If I went apeshit in here, you'd be in a lot of trouble, wouldn't you? I could screw your head off and place it on the table to greet the guard." Kemper's hair psychopathy checklist score is only 20. This is below the average of the US prisoner population. It is also well below the level required to meet the criteria for psychopathy. It was in his interest to prove he wasn't a psychopath to bolster his claims of rehabilitation. This raises the question of whether Kemper used his knowledge of psychometric testing to manipulate the scoring. I reviewed any recorded interviews of Kemper and read transcripts of non-taped interviews. After reviewing these interviews and transcripts, it appears that Kemper's diagnoses include 1. Antisocial personality disorder, 2. Narcissistic personality disorder, 3. Schizotypal personality disorder. Many watching this video will be familiar with antisocial and narcissistic personality disorders. Schizotypal personality disorder is much less well known, so I'll point out some characteristics of schizotypal personality disorder to bear in mind when looking at Kemper's interviews. Once you know what to look for, it is striking how many he exhibits. According to the ICD-10, schizotypal personality disorder is a disorder characterized by eccentric behavior and abnormalities of thinking and affect. These resemble those seen in schizophrenia, though no definite and characteristic schizophrenic abnormalities have occurred at any age. There is no dominant or typical disturbance, but any of the following may be present. Inappropriate or restricted affect, appearing cold and aloof. Kemper definitely displays this most of the time when interviewed. Affect is the demonstration of a subjective internal emotional state through someone's actions, their body and facial movements, tone, rhythm, and rate of voice, content of speech, etc. Behavior or appearance that is odd, eccentric, or peculiar. This isn't a particular feature of Kemper's presentation. Poor rapport with others and a tendency to withdraw socially. This is weakly a feature of Kemper's presentation. Odd beliefs or magical thinking, influencing behavior and inconsistent with subcultural norms. Kemper describes these on several occasions. Suspiciousness or paranoid ideas. Kemper describes this following his murder of his grandparents. Obsessive ruminations without inner resistance. Kemper freely admits this being a feature of his life. Unusual perceptual experiences including bodily or other illusions, depersonalization or derealization. Vague, circumstantial, metaphorical, over-elaborate or stereotyped thinking, manifested by odd speech or in other ways without gross incoherence. This is less obviously a feature of Kemper's presentation. Occasional transient quasi-psychotic episodes with intense illusions, auditory or other hallucinations, and delusion-like ideas, usually occurring without external provocation. These were present following his murder of his grandparents, and are probably a major reason why he was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic at that time. It is differentiated from obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD, by determining that the obsessive thinking is not upsetting and not resisted. In OCD, it is both upsetting and resisted. It is differentiated from schizophrenia and other psychotic illnesses by demonstrating that the unusual sensations and hallucination-like and delusion-like phenomena don't have the delusional qualities of being fixed, despite evidence to the contrary, and are not believed to a delusional extent with no possibility of any other explanation. There is a facet to Kemper that is happy to share his insights and introspections, but we must never forget that he also has less pure motives. These include curating the narrative of his deeds, managing his reputation, and toying with those who come to assess him for his own enjoyment. Kemper is the definition of Nietzsche's warning that those who gaze into the abyss will find the abyss gazing back at them. In this case, the abyss is a very large, very intelligent, very dangerous man. His brother David said it best when he said, "Ed is a complete sociopath. He could look you straight in the eye telling you how sorry he is for everything he did, while, at the same time, plotting your demise, and you'd never even have a clue. I think he manipulates everyone. I think that he has never told anyone the truth about things he has done. I would suspect he's holding back a good 20 to 30% of the truth about himself, his past, and how he thinks." I hope you found this analysis of Kemper's 1984 interview interesting. This is the first in a series of videos on Ed Kemper. It's important to clarify that I have never personally assessed Kemper, and so cannot formally diagnose him. These thoughts are based on my clinical and forensic experience of what could be happening in similar situations, and a thorough review of Kemper's trial and interviews. If you'd like to find out more about profiling of serial killers, we have provided you with links to books by Robert Ressler of the FBI Behavioral Science Unit and Kemper on Kemper, which gathers transcripts of Kemper's confessions and interviews. Both are fascinating reads. These are affiliate links, so if you purchase through them, we'll receive a commission, which we'll put towards creating more and better content. Please leave any comments or questions in the comment section, and we'll do our best to answer them. If you'd like to be notified when we release videos, remember to subscribe and hit the bell icon. This channel is dedicated to exploring the interaction with and impact of mental health, human psychology and psychiatry on interesting forensic cases. Take care and stay safe.